This is going to be a very small video where we try to understand how exactly we are supposed to be analyzing our CAT VRC, mocks, or sectionals, and everything else in between, right? You probably would have already heard of this idea, this maxim that taking a lot of sectionals and mocks is very, very important if you really want a better score in CAT. But there isn't exactly a lot of literature around that tells you exactly how you need to go about analyzing these tests and mocks and sections that you have been taking or that you are required to take over time. So when we generally talk about analyzing an entire mock, we try to not just look at the questions that we are getting wrong. We also understand the idea that we can derive a lot of information, lot of good information from the questions that we did get right or we did not even attempt. So very quick recap on CAT pattern: 40 minutes, 24 questions, 16 RCs, 4 questions, 4 RCs, 16 questions, and then 8 verbal ability paragraph-based questions, right? Our goal, 99 percentile plus. How do we get there? How exactly do mocks really help us? That basically becomes our main problem that we are intending to solve here, right? The idea is that the more mocks you can solve, the better it is. But at the same time, when we, or not just me, technically all the teachers go out and say that, hey, you need to take a lot of mocks, it's not just the idea of taking mocks and solving a lot of papers that we are asking you to do. It's also about the idea that we basically want you to go there, spend a lot of time taking these mocks and everything, but then spend maybe 3 to 4x that time analyzing the mock. There is no point in just solving random questions if you are not spending 3, 4, 5 minutes per question analyzing how could you have solved it in a better way. What exactly did you learn from that entire idea? So the thing that you are supposed to worry about here is not the absolute quantity of mocks that you are taking, rather it is how well you are analyzing the mock. So the 40 to 60 number that you probably see people throwing around is maybe indicative, but it's not a silver lining that if you do 50 mocks you are going to get a 99%. At the same time, it's also not true that if you do not do 50 mocks or 50 sectionals, then you are not definitely not going to get a 99 or 100%. That's just a misnomer. The idea is that even if you're taking 20, 25 mocks, you need to analyze them extremely well. Rather than taking 1 or 2 extra mocks, you should instead be spending your time analyzing whatever it is that you've already done. Uh, Building on things that you are already aware of, that you already know, is a lot more easier than going out and then trying to do everything from scratch, right? And of course, at the start, your mocks are not exactly going to be favorable in terms of score. Even when we sit for the CAT examination, the difference between the average mock scores that you have as well as and the actual CAT score is going to be plus minus 5 to 10 percentile. So even if you are getting like 90, 91 percentile on average in mocks, that doesn't really mean that you are definitely not getting a 99 on your CAT examination. On the actual D-Day, the only thing that matters is how calm you are, and basically just how panicked you are, how basically how well you are able to handle your emotions. It's definitely not the case that on CAT day itself things are going to change materially. It's just how well you are able to control your emotions, the hard work you have already done by that point, right? So let's start with the idea that the first few mocks that you are going to take, your scores are not going to be high. Your initial phase mocks are basically going to be extremely low. if i be if I am being slightly more realistic about how your scores are going to look like, you are probably going to start somewhere around mid 20s or maybe even lower 20s. Then you will see suddenly your mock scores will slide to go down, maybe go even negative. Then you will see some improvement. Then again, they will go down. Then again, you will see some improvement. Then again, it's going to be a very jumbled up way. Only towards the end of somewhere around September, October onwards, you will see some consistent improvement in your actual mock performance. But at the same time, when we talk about mocks, we do not really want you to look at the score at least for the next 2 to 3 months. All we really expect you to do is to be able to take the mock, understand that it's just a mock, it's just a sectional, it's just practice material, and then build from there. Right. So that is the fundamental idea that we want you to go with, that your scores for the next 2 to 3 to 4 months are not really an indication of your actual preparedness for the examination. Specifically at the start, you are going to be taken by surprise with the timer that's constantly ticking. You will suddenly realize, hey, am I trying to over attempt the paper? so on and so forth. So there will be so many things that you would be looking at for the first time. So the first 3 4 mocks will just go in you adjusting to the interface and everything, and then again slowly you will start to analyze, then again you will try to do everything at once. So that's a sudden dip that you will see, and then slowly and steadily you will analyze, then implement, then analyze and implement, and that's basically the real progress that you would see somewhere around after 1.5 month. Okay, so we have talked a lot about why exactly analysis is important, but let's talk about how exactly do we analyze the entire thing, right? So here's a 6-step flow. You can also screenshot this if you want, but this is basically what I want you to look at. This is basically what I want you to understand, that this is how we are going to go about analyzing our mock, right? First is you have just taken the mock, right? It's just over. You look at the score, you analyze, this is my accuracy, this is how much I attempted, this is how many questions I got wrong, and that's it. That's basically all the information that you have. You are not supposed to look at information at this point. The immediate next step for you whenever you get time is to attempt all the skipped questions. It's very unlikely that you are going to be able to attempt all 24 questions. If you are attempting that's obviously great, but at the same time, if you are missing out on some questions, let's say normally we would expect you to be able to solve around 16 to 18 questions for the first 1.5 month of your examination, if you are a repeater of sort, if you have prepared extremely well, maybe even lower if you are a beginner, right? But then the idea is that you are probably not going to be attempting more than 66% or 2/3 of the paper at the start. So in that particular case, your focus should go into attempting the remainder skipped out portion of the examination that you did not attempt in the actual mock attempt. This you should do without a timer. This you should do without a timer, right? So this is basically where a lot of people do not spend a lot of time. Just because something is missed by you does not mean it is not something that you could not have attempted in the actual examination. This is basically where the piece where you need to start analyzing, hey, did I pick the wrong RC? Did I pick the wrong set of verbal ability questions, right? Could I have skimmed this entire RC in a slightly better way, so on and so forth, right? And then of course you then spend a lot of time revisiting all of the wrong answers, and then as a continuation of this, you also analyze all the answers that you got correct, right? If you are short on time, of course you can skip the later step, but you definitely need to revisit all the answers that you got wrong, right? Then you need to classify all of these into a taxonomy, right? You classify everything in a taxonomy. We will talk about this taxonomy in subsequent slides, but the idea remains the same. You need to analyze all the wrong answers. You need to do a deep passage audit. What we basically mean by deep passage audit is that, are you spending a lot of time on this? And for that time spent, how much are you scoring? What is your accuracy in that particular area? Think of it in a very simple way. If you spend a lot of time on something, you should ideally get it right, right? But at the same time, if you are spending a lot of time on things and even then you are getting it wrong, then that's basically the worst case scenario. If you are going to make mistakes, which you will, it's not going to be the case that you are going to have 100% accuracy on your examination. But if you are going to make a lot of mistakes, at least make those mistakes faster. If you are making mistakes and also spending a lot of time making that mistake, then you need to do something about it. That should be your immediate priority, that, hey, this is the area that I really want to focus on. The best case scenario on the flip side would be that you do something extremely fast and with very high accuracy. So for instance, para summary, I would assume would be that area for a lot of you. Very easy question types. We are able to do it in under 120 seconds, under 100 seconds, and our accuracy is about 80-85% there. That's probably the best case scenario. Maybe for para jumbles, it's going to be the flip for almost all of you. You spend a lot of time doing that, and even then your accuracy is pretty low. So maybe you need to solve more para jumbles. You need to spend more time just practicing para jumbles in that particular case, right? But the idea is that you do a deep audit of the entire paragraph of the entire paper. This just says as is, but this basically means entirety of the paper. You need to understand how much time you are spending and how much you are scoring up against that time, right? Similarly, based on what you get from there, you classify everything in a 4-error taxonomy: type 1, type 2, type 3, type 4. We'll talk about it in a bit, right? And then you make a plan for your next mock, right? Think of it in a very simple term. If you take a mock, you need to focus on maybe 1 or 2 things that you want to immediately improve upon. You are going to make a lot of mistakes, but if you try to focus on everything at once, you are just constantly going to repeat the same mistakes, and maybe you will make new mistakes that you do not want to make. So rather than trying to fix everything at once, focus on the idea that, hey, I probably made 15 type of mistakes in this particular exam, in this particular mock. These three are my biggest problems. Let me work on these three. Parajumble is my biggest problem. Para completion is my biggest problem. Fill in the blank is my biggest problem. Inference type questions are my biggest problem. Let me focus on maybe three of these. Let me now focus on parajumbles and inferences, or maybe one other thing before I attempt my next mock, and then see how much am I able to improve. Let me just work on these two things. Let me put everything else on hold. I can work on the other mistakes at a later stage. That is basically how you want to audit it. The other thing is that also need to realize that how could you have scored 3 more marks, rather than thinking you would have wanted to score 20 more marks or 30 more marks. Go in a piecemeal manner. If you scored a 25, how could you have gotten a 28? How could you have gotten a 30? Rather than thinking, hey, I definitely want to score 40 plus. Think in smaller steps. They are easy to achieve. You can make a plan for an extremely short type of score, because for three you basically just need to either do three less incorrect questions, or maybe just solve one more extra question that is correct. That's all there is, right? Focus on that. Can I just get one more question right? And then you are suddenly in the next percentile range. From 85 percentile, suddenly you are in the 90 percentile range. That's basically what I mean by when I say that you need to have a plan. So rather than trying to do everything at once, just focus on 2 or 3 odd things, or maybe even just 1 or 2 odd things at the start, and then think that I just want to focus on these two things. This is basically how I can use my analysis to maybe save some time, makes less mistakes, and maybe attempt one extra question which turns out to be correct. That should be your strategy audit. That should be your next mock plan. Okay, so talking more about this taxonomy, what exactly do I mean by that? We basically have 4 types of errors. There are only 4 types of errors that you can 4 types of mistakes that you can normally make whenever you are attempting a mock. A part of it is also something that will be applicable to other 2 subjects, but I'll not really talk about that, of course. The first type of mistake that you will make is that you actually did not know something. Let me take a quant example for this. If you did not study coordinate geometry at all, even I give you a very simple coordinate geometry problem, you don't even know enough to understand that it was an easy question. So the first step for you to understand is, hey, if I got this philosophy RC wrong, did I even spend some time maybe familiarizing myself with philosophy basics, philosophy concepts? If I'm not able to understand what right wing means, or what communism means, or what socialism means in this politics RC, have I maybe spent 1-2 hours just trying to read up about all of these things, right? That is basically what I mean by concept gap. Have I actually gone through all the classes of parajumbas? Have I gone through all the application-based classes, right? I am not able to solve this assumption question. I'm not able to solve this inference question. I'm not able to solve this source question. I'm not able to solve this tone question. Most of the times you would realize that you probably have missed out on that particular class where that concept was covered in detail. You probably lack in practice somewhere, right? So that is error number 1. If that is a concept gap, all you really need to do to solve that particular concept gap is go through your classes, revisit those classes, revise those sessions, revisit your notes, and then practice a bit, and then jump to the next mock, right? Jump to the next section, whatever it is that you are attempting. That's the first type of mistake that you will make, a concept gap. The second type of mistake that you will make is a comprehension problem, right? So you know the subject matter at hand, you understood philosophy RC, but at the same time stood some parts of the passage, right? You misread some part of the passage, you misread some question. Instead of looking at certain words, you misunderstood those words. This is basically something that takes the most time to improve upon, because this is something that can only be improved by more and more and more practice, right? You need to spend a lot of time analyzing things. You need to spend a lot of time reading things, because if you have a fundamental comprehension problem for a majority of RCs, and again, when I say comprehension problem, I do not mean it that you were not able to understand one difficult RC in the passage. That's okay. That's just a focus problem. That's probably just a time problem, right? When I say comprehension problem, I basically want to say that you are not able to understand majority of the RC. You are not able to understand 100% of the RC. That is not a comprehension problem, right? That's probably a low kerosene. A case like that would mostly be because you did not get the questions right. You did not understand the questions right. But when we talk about comprehension problem, we basically imply that you were not able to understand maybe even 60% of the passage. In that particular case, you need to understand why you were not able to understand it. Maybe look at the video solutions that are given to you, the discussions that happen for these mocks, and try to understand why exactly did I not understand this part. Sure, before you attend the solutions, you need to go through things on your own, spend more time on it, even if it takes you an hour just to read through one passage in order to for you to get to understand it in a better way. You need to spend that time on that passage, right? So comprehension problem, slightly difficult to improve upon, but also probably the most common type of mistake. You misunderstood some part of the passage. You again need to understand why you are doing that, why you constantly keep on making that mistake. And again, you try to read more, you try to solve more RCs, and this is something that will get better and better the more you practice. Okay. Then you have a option problem. You understood the passage, you understood the option, you understood the question, but you did not eliminate the questions correctly, right? You were down to two options, and this is going to be the problem for a majority of you, that you were down to two options, you eliminated two options, you are now down to two options, and then suddenly you just picked the wrong option. And this is exactly why you also need to analyze the questions that you got wrong. Because if you were stuck in two options and you just did a J Matadi between the two of them, your probability of being wrong was also 50%. It was probably just luck that you got that question right. It could have very well have been wrong. So you need to analyze those type of questions as well, even though you got them right. Okay. So you need to understand why the other option was wrong, why the option that you selected was right or the other way around. If you were stuck between two options, you really need to analyze why the other option was wrong. Okay, so normally we have a framework for this. We have the banger approach that we teach in EG. Of course, I'm pretty sure that all, regardless of which institution you have joined, if you're not a part of EG, there will be some sort of approach for process of elimination that would be taught to you. There are also numerous videos about it. But then the idea is that we normally eliminate extreme options. We normally eliminate options that are not lying in a certain scope, that are too broad or too narrow. We normally eliminate options that are opposite of what the passage says. We also eliminate options that are distortions in nature. The question is about paragraph 1. You basically answered based on paragraph number 2, right? So that is basically the sort of problems that I'm talking about. This is very easy to fix. All you really need to do is read the options more carefully, revisit process of elimination lectures, revisit the banger lectures, and then you will get suddenly better at this. You just need to make sure that you are actually implementing all of this in your actual examination. The last type of E4 error that you will make is a focus problem, a process problem, a carelessness problem. You missed out on certain words when you were reading the question. Instead of reading you did not notice the except word in the passage, in the question. You did not notice the false word in the question. The question read, which of the following can be inferred? If false from the passage. You did not read the if false part. The question says, which of the following can be inferred from the passage except. You did not read the except word. That is a problem. You need to make sure that you are reading the entire question, you are reading the entire passage, and you're also eliminating all the wrong options. Always remember that verbal ability is not a game of selecting the right answer. Verbal ability is always a game of eliminating the wrong answers, right? Whatever it is that you are not able to eliminate is generally your answer. So always go from that perspective. Even if it takes you maybe 30 more seconds, 15, 20 more seconds to solve a question, that is fine. Solving one less question, two less questions is okay. If that comes at the cost of improved accuracy, always remember that part. Okay, so this is the taxonomy that we talked about in the flow, that you need to classify everything in a certain way. Now, where do you classify everything, right? You need to make a log. Now, again, this is a very simple log that I created for the purpose of this. This does not have any detail at all, but I would want you to create your own log, be it in a notepad, be it in an Excel, be it in whatever tool that you are familiar with. It doesn't even have to be digitized. It could just be something that you are noting in a pen and paper. But the idea is you basically want to look at, this is my mock number 1 or section number 1. These were the 4 RCs. These were the topics of those RCs. And again, topics just can be approximations. It does not have to be the exact topic, because a lot of times you would see that one particular RC touches upon 2-3 disciplines, right? So a lot of times you can just write miscellaneous, you can just write philosophy plus politics as well. It doesn't have to be exact. So do not spend a lot of time filling the detail. What really matters is an approximation, because over time your data becomes more and more important. You will start to see patterns and everything, right? So the idea is, how many questions did you attempt? Why did you skip things? What was your accuracy here, right? If you got things right, maybe add a comment section here as well, which tells you that I got a main idea question wrong, right? Maybe add a detail that I got the question wrong because I made a stupid mistake. Maybe create another sheet in your Excel workbook or in your notepad where you are constantly highlighting all the stupid mistakes that you are making before every mock. Go through that entire list so that it is fresh in your head and you do not repeat those mistakes, right? This log part is going to be very, very idiosyncratic. This is something that you will have to build on your own based on the information that you are comfortable with, based on your technical ability. This is obviously again something that we will prefer not to give you a template of, because the more time you spend building things that you want to focus on, the more likely it is that you are actually going to be filling it. If we just give you a template, it's very, very likely that you are not even going to be filling it. So whatever it is that you're comfortable with, be it pen and paper, be it an Excel log, be it a notepad log, whatever it is, the important thing for you to remember is to track the mocks, especially considering that a lot of you will be taking mocks across different platforms. Maybe some of you will take EG, some of you will take maybe EG plus IMS, SimCats, etc., etc. So of course, to have that interdisciplinary comparison, inter-platform comparison, you need to have a tracker that you are maintaining on your own. Okay, the more details that you can put there, the better. If you can also classify what sort of questions you are constantly getting wrong, that is again just cherry on cake. It helps you focus on that, hey, I'm constantly getting main idea questions wrong, I'm constantly getting tone questions wrong. So you can practice more of those questions at the end of the day, right? I'm constantly getting tone questions. I will revisit tone lecture. I will revisit some of the vocabulary around the common type of tones. I will revisit some of the other questions that we probably practice in the classes, and that's it. That's the basic framework that you can do. See if that is helping. If it is not helping, talk to your teachers that, hey, I am still constantly making these mistakes. What can I do? Your teachers can give you a better solution to that, right? So that is basically the overall idea that I want you to look at. Have a taxonomy in place that these are the 4 type of mistakes that I'm making. What sort of mistakes am I making, and in what type of questions am I making? If I'm making a mistake, am I also taking a lot of time to make that mistake? That's the fundamental that you have to worry about. So let me put it this way: you want to worry about how much time it is taking you to do that. What is your accuracy around thing? What type of error you are making, whether it is error 1, error 2, error 3, error 4, right? And then at the end of the day, you are also worried about what type of question it is that you got wrong. Are you constantly getting parajumbas wrong? Are you constantly getting main idea questions wrong, etc., etc.? The more detail out of these 4 categories you can put in, the better it is. How much time it is taking you to solve something, how much you are able to score in terms of accuracy, what's your accuracy rate, how much you are getting, how much you are getting incorrect, etc., etc. What is your attempt rate, etc., etc. What is the taxonomy of your errors? What type of error it is, whether it is error 1, error 2, error 3, error 4, E1, E2, E3, E4 that we have highlighted here. And then what type of question it is that you are getting wrong. Try to incorporate as much information in the tracker that you create for yourself. Do not copy someone else's tracker, because again, as I mentioned, it's very likely that you are not going to be filling it, that you are not going to even fill it if you just copy it from someone. It's not how it works. Everyone will have a different level of activity that they would want to have, that they would want to focus on. Spend 10-15 minutes to figure out what that is for you, and then build it for yourself. Okay. And sometime later, maybe 2-3 months down the line, you will then start to focus on some additional questions. What sort of RCs should you try to skip? Eventually, you will realize that attempting all 24 questions is probably not a good idea in CAT, right? Once you do realize that, you will basically have to start thinking about, if I am not going to be attempting all the 4 RCs. I'm not saying that you need to definitely skip 1 RC. All I'm saying is that some of you will definitely skip 1 RC, right? So for those some of you who think that I would rather do three RCs and then maybe 8 verbal ability questions or 6 verbal ability questions, so that I'm somewhere in the 18 to 20 attempt range, right? You will probably miss out on 1 RC, right? In that particular case, it becomes very, very important for you to figure out what sort of RC it is that you are skipping on. If you end up skipping an easy RC, then that's a problem. If you end up attempting a very difficult RC, also that's a problem, right? So you need to spend a lot of time in your analysis after 1.5 months to figure out, are you attempting the right set of RCs? You also will come across a challenge of, does it help you if you read the RC first, or does it help you if you do the verbal ability questions first? Does it help you to attempt RC first? What exactly should be your strategy? A very common strategy that people follow is maybe do 2 RCs, then do some verbal ability questions, then again have 1 more RC in place. A lot of people do a version of this, maybe do 2 RCs, then 4 verbal ability questions, then 1 RC, and then again have time for 1 more RC. The general distribution that we suggest is that you need to have somewhere around 28 to 30 minutes for reading comprehension in total, and then about 10 to 12 minutes for verbal ability. 10 to 12 minutes for verbal ability and about 28 to 30 minutes for reading comprehension. That's basically where we are. At the same time, you also need to focus on what your correct ratio for attempt to accuracy is. A lot of times, if you just try to attempt very aggressively, you are going to make a lot of mistakes, which will impact your accuracy very negatively. So try reducing your attempts. Maybe if you are attempting 15 questions, try to get to a place where you are now just attempting 9 questions, 10 questions. See how that impacts your accuracy. In the next mock, try to attempt 12 questions. See how that impacts things. In the next mock, in the next section, try to attempt 13, then jump to 14, then stabilize your score, then come to 15. If you try to do everything at once, it's the same idea. You are going to be extremely frustrated by things. It's not going to work. So you need to spend a lot of time understanding what works for you, what doesn't work for you. Okay. And then you also need to create that stupid tracker. You do not want to make these stupid mistakes. This is basically an extension of the E4 process carelessness part, but these are the common stupid mistakes that we talk about, right? So you did not even read all the 4 options. Always read the 4 options. You picked an option which was extreme in language. We normally eliminate extreme questions. Of course, there are exceptions in place where extreme language options are correct as well, but normally I would say 95% of the cases that's not the case. So are you picking an extreme language option? Are you even noticing those extreme words in place? Are you noticing those always, never, only, must, would be, etc type of words, right? Something that is true based on your personal understanding, based on your own knowledge, but is not given to you in the passage, is also not going to be correct. You have to solve questions always from the point of view of the RC. You cannot use your knowledge that is not there. Sure, this does not mean that you do not use common sense. This just means that you cannot use outside knowledge information, right? Do not let that impact your understanding of things. If you have a retention problem, you need to use the test approach. You need to make pairwise maps. Okay. If you run out of time middle of the RC, then that basically means you need to reshuffle the way that you are attempting the paper. Maybe do RCs first and then save the rest last 10 minutes for verbal ability. This is again something that you can very easily fix by just shuffling through what you are attempting, shuffling the order of what you're attempting. And then verbal ability mistakes. You got a PJ, you understood things, you did not apply a chain rule. You did not apply a chain rule. You just looked at that, hey, AB makes sense and then CD makes sense. So the answer will be ABCD, but you are not even seeing if B and C also go together, then the answer could be CDAB. So you need to understand these mistakes, these very common stupid mistakes, and you need to make sure that you do not repeat these mistakes. Okay, you need to spend a lot of time on your verbal ability analysis. If a mock is 40 minutes, right? So you need to spend at least 1.5 to 2 hours analyzing that entire mock. You need to be spending a lot of time doing that. You need to classify everything. You need to reattempt questions. You need to track per passage time versus accuracy, per passage accuracy analysis. You need to experiment with what you are attempting, whether you are attempting RC first or whether you are attempting VA first, how many questions you are attempting, so on and so forth. You always attempt theta questions since there is no negative marking. These are normally only 2 or 3 odd questions in verbal ability, so you always attempt them, right? You always go through the actual solutions after you are done attempting the skipped out questions, and then again once you are done analyzing things on your own, only then you go through the actual mock analysis with whatever teacher it is that you have, right? With whatever video solution it is that you have. You need to maintain a lot of trackers for the sort of mistakes that you are making, and then you have to just pick 1 or 2 specific targets that you can focus on, that you would want to prioritize to focus on before you take the next mock, right? You need to review your error log after every mock, and you need to go through it before taking every mock. Okay, do not just jump into the next mock without analyzing one. Again, quantity does not matter, quality matters. You need to work on mistakes. Just don't classify, just don't do this taxonomy and say, yeah, I'll work on it. Actually work on it, spend some time on it, understand why you are making that mistakes, right? Do not just analyze the wrong answers, also analyze the right answers, right? Do not just do a partial analysis of things. Even if for some of you, you probably haven't gone through VA lectures yet, right? So do not just escape out on VA saying that, hey, VA to mujhko nahi aata hai, VA nahi hota hai, VA to abhi kara hi nahi hai, baad mein kar lenge. At least try. It's just English. You all know English. It's language at the end of the day. Doing it and having a strategy in place is better than confusing yourself. right? Do not skip theta questions, of course. Do not spend a lot of time on one RC. If it takes you a lot of time to go through the first paragraph itself, a very good rule of thumb is that you probably should skip that RC. Let me repeat that. A very good rule of thumb to select the right RCs is to just read the first paragraph. If it takes you a lot of time to just understand what the first paragraph is saying, normally you should not be attempting that first RC. Of course, this is an approach that can backfire tremendously as well, because in a lot of passages these days, you would see that the first paragraph was the only paragraph that was difficult. So again, in our regular classes, we will talk about rather the exact solution to that as well. How exactly do you want to select the right RCs? But for now, just take that as a rule of thumb. Okay. Do not take multiple mocks in a single day. That's almost never a good idea. Okay. Do not accept the idea that हम तो हमेशा ही दो ऑप्शन के बीच में फंसेंगे, ऐसा तो होगा, ऐसा नहीं होता है. लॉजिक फिगर आउट करने का ट्राई करो. राइट. डू नॉट मेमोराइज आंसर्स कि इस तरीके के पैराजम्बल में इस तरीके का आंसर होता है. वो वाला काम हमें क्वांट एंड एलआरडीआई में करना है. VARC के अंदर pattern recognition does not work, keyword approach does not work. You go with the idea that, hey, this word is in paragraph, this word is in the passage, this word is also in this option, so it should be right. That almost never works in verbal ability. Okay. And then at the same time, you are just rereading the entire thing rather than understanding your mistakes. That's also a problem. You need to solve that entire paper again. That's the biggest idea. Okay. So make a tracker, go through these do's and don'ts, have a taxonomy in place, and give it at least 2 months before you start judging yourself on your mock performance. It's a slow process for verbal ability. It takes up a lot of time to do all of that, but you will get there. Don't overly worry about all of this. Don't be so hard on yourself, even if things go wrong for you. Okay. So I hope this entire framework really helps you to analyze your VARC mocks in a better way. Of course, we will also go through the classes and try to tell you all of this again, that, hey, this is how you could have structured it in a better way. But at the same time, I hope you understand that the taxonomy will always be your own. Just because you misread a question does not mean everyone misread a question. That's exactly why you need to make a tracker for yourself rather than just copying it from someone. Okay. So that's all for this analysis session. Thank you, everyone. I will see you guys in the next one. Bye-bye.